Welcome, all of you, and good morning. I'm in Kansas, but Kelton is at the lab in South Dakota, and I want to welcome Dr. Kelton Welch. He is our person who's in charge of all of the insects. And remember when we were at your farms, we did the sweeps where we collected all the insects that were on the leaves, on the plant vegetation. And then we also, right, sat down on the ground with the quad and our aspirators, and we sucked up all those bugs off the ground. And Kelton is the one that, makes sure that we get every single bug, takes pictures of them, identifies them, and of course, been working on the new bug box, which is our AI version, where eventually the goal, right, is for you guys to be able to sweep your own fields and take a picture of it and be able to identify the bugs that are in the bag. So yeah, Dr. Kelton Welch, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Um, well, this is going to be cool. All right. I'm excited to talk to you guys. So basically, what my goal here is, we'll give a little bit of an overview of what insects are, but basically, I'll be focusing on kind of what we do with insect research at Ecdysis Foundation and how it kind of fits in with everything else. So I'm going to start just a brief overview of, see if I can actually get the click starting. Okay, there we go. All right, so in this talk, we're going to I'm going to start at the very basics and assume that you don't know much about insects. We'll start at the very beginning, do some basics of what insects are, what they do, why we care about them in agriculture, and then we'll talk a lot about how Ecdysis is measuring insects and kind of what we're going to report to the farmers that work with us in our various projects. Now, what I've found in my time of doing these sorts of presentations is that the public these days is generally pretty savvy about, the basics of insects, right? Like, for example, I'm sure all of you are aware that not all bugs, all things that we call bugs, are insects. Like there's a whole bunch of different kinds of them. But insects is kind of the main thing that we talk about and the most abundant and most important group. But specifically, insects are the kind of bugs that have 6 legs and they have 3 body regions. So it's head, thorax, abdomen. And you can see that on pretty much all of these bugs. They have antennae, they have wings, usually have wings. Some of them don't, like this ant doesn't have wings. But if you see a bug that has wings, that's an insect, right? There's no other kinds of bugs that have wings. There are, here in the United States, there are over 100,000 species of insects. Just to give you an idea, and the United States isn't particularly special in this regard. You think of like the tropics, they'll have even more insects than we do. But 100,000 is a lot of species. Um, it's by far the majority of all the things we would call a bug. There's a couple other types of bugs too. You could talk about arachnids. This is spiders, scorpions, mites. This thing is called a pseudoscorpion. It doesn't have a tail, so it's not a true scorpion. Arachnids, they kind of get lumped in with insects a lot, but they're different. They have 8 legs. They don't have 3 body regions. They usually only have 2. You can see it really well on this spider here. Um, you guys can see my cursor, right? I think you can. Yeah, okay. And then sometimes you see that the 2 body regions are merged into one, sort of like this. They don't have antennae, they don't have wings, they have like chelicerae and pedipalps. These are mouth parts and arms that turn into fangs and pincers and stuff like that. And they're less common than insects, but still pretty common. There's 10,000 species here in the United States. So there's still kind of an important part of it. You also have something called myriapods. This is centipedes and millipedes. They're this long bodies, lots of segments, lots of legs. They also have antennae like insects, but they don't have wings. And there's probably looking at about 1,000 species here in the United States. Um, and I don't know if you know that roly-polies are actually crustaceans. They're kind of related to shrimps and crabs and lobsters, things like that, right? And they have their own special characteristics. They have gills, even though they don't live in the water. And there's about 1,000 species of crustaceans. Most of them live in like ponds and water, rivers, streams, things like that. But they have the pill bugs, the roly-polies live out on land as well. And if you really want to make an entomologist happy, the word that you would use for all of these is arthropods, right? This is the kind of the name that we've given to all of them. It just means jointed legs, and that's kind of the description for it. But generally, like the word bug is fine. We use the word bug a lot. insect. I'll probably, in this presentation, I'll probably talk about insects, but know that all these other things kind of get lumped in with insects as well, even though you can see the insects are the majority of it and everything. Um, and I want to, before I move on from the words thing, I want to mention one more word about the word bug. Um, as entomologists, we kind of have a habit of using the word bug in a more specific way. There's a specific kind of insect that are called true bugs. And we usually use the word, when we say bug, we often mean this is what we're referring to. So you might hear me accidentally use the word bug in this way. They have this sort of like piercing, sucking mouth part. They stab into something and then suck out the juices, like this assassin bug or pirate bug. This is a leafhopper and that's an aphid. But just know that that's a word that might come up when I'm working, when I'm talking. Um, another thing that the public is really savvy about, of course, is that not all insects are pests. Like there's a habit that we have as humans for a long time. We tend to you see the word insect and the first thing you think of is pests. There's a lot of pests that have been spend all their time in the spotlight and they've really been an important influence for agriculture and for human society. Here's a couple of examples. A corn rootworm is a perennial pest that corn farmers worry about a lot. About 10 or 15 years ago, this brown marmorated stink bug was being focused on. It eats a variety of plants. It's invasive from another location. The spotted lanternfly is one that's come up recently that's starting to invade across the United States. But generally speaking, these are minorities. Like most insects are not pests. Like the common factor, the common figure that people give is 1 to 3% of insect species are pests. Personally, I think that's probably an overestimate. I think it's probably less than 1%. One of the problems that you have with identifying pests is that a pest is not necessarily like the bug doesn't identify as a pest. It's not the bug's identity to be a pest. There's not like a gene that says you are a pest, right? It's usually insects become pests under the right circumstances, and usually those circumstances are are frankly is things that we've done, right? We either bring in an insect to a habitat that's not ready for it, that it isn't able to control it, or we're doing something to the environment, like we're overusing our natural resources, we're oversimplifying the habitats, we're disrupting natural cycles. These are sort of things that make it likely that an insect can become a pest, right? Let's take like a specific example. We can look at this corn rootworm. This is one of the nastiest, worst pests imaginable. We talk about it a lot. They attribute billions of dollars of damage to it, annually. It's called the corn rootworm because the larva is kind of worm-like and it eats the roots of your corn, and so it causes the whole corn plant to fall over and ruins your harvest and everything. And it can cause a lot of damage, and it is a problem. And we've invested billions of dollars, not we, but society has invested billions of dollars in programs to make, uh, you know, genetically modified corn that can fight this pest and everything. But the reality of this situation is that it really wouldn't be in a position to cause billions of dollars of damage if we hadn't if we hadn't planted the entire Midwest into one big ocean of corn. Like, I don't know, you guys that are in the Midwest, you guys know there's so much corn here, right? Corn just, it isn't a very good habitat for bugs. There's not many bugs that can really thrive in a cornfield. So the ones that can thrive kind of get the place to themselves, right? And they can just do whatever they want. And so the corn rootworm goes out of control because there's nothing that can kind of get in its way. And so the reality is that it's kind of what we did. We kind of planted a smorgasbord and then kind of we label it as a pest, but it's kind of like our way of blaming the bug for causing the problem. In reality, we kind of bear responsibility for this. If we diversified our crops a little bit and found better ways to, make habitat for more bugs, we wouldn't have seen such a massive level of damage from this bug, right? But I don't want to focus on pests all the time. Like again, 99% of insects are not pests, right? And in fact, most of these insects are actually doing kind of important things in their ecosystem. And these are kind of the ones that I want to focus on. There's a huge diversity of insects. I could talk to you forever about all these different insects that you see on this screen right here. There's a lot of interesting things we could say, but I want to focus more on what they mean for you, what they mean for conservation, for agriculture, for their ecosystems and things like that. And I'm going to basically say insects do important jobs. They have important functional roles in their ecosystems. And I'm going to talk about four basic categories of jobs that insects do. Just for the purpose of this presentation, you could probably, define the jobs however you want to, but I'm going to look at it this way. And we're going to start with one job an important job that insects do is herbivores. Um, these are plant eaters, and usually, again, herbivores, we think of them as being the pests, right? These are the ones that cause all the pest problems, are the ones that are eating our crop plants. But the reality is that most of the herbivores are not hurting you in any particular way. Most of them are not going to hurt your bottom line, even if they're feeding on your crop plant. Your plant is actually pretty well designed to manage that, right? They can tolerate some damage and some feeding from insects. And so most of the time they're going to stay below that economic injury level and they're not going to do you a lot of damage. So I don't want you as a farmer to be afraid of herbivores. But the key there is to make it is regulation to make sure the community is functioning properly. And when they are functioning properly, they can do a lot of cool things, right? A lot of herbivores will attack the invasive weeds and the other unwanted plants. They'll eat the seed bank for those weeds and they'll help control your weed problems, keep your community kind of balanced. They can regulate and structure all the communities of vegetation in your field. And another important thing they do is their food for other bugs, for birds, for things that you kind of want to see in your ecosystem. And the truth is that you need a good, healthy community of herbivores in order to support those predators, in order to have services from them. Um, yeah. What else do I want to say about herbivores? So don't be afraid of your herbivores, okay? Next, I want to point out to one very specific kind of herbivore. My arrow keys don't work, so I'm just going to use the mouse. Now, pollinators. You guys have probably heard a lot about pollinators. They've been in the spotlight for research and policy initiatives for quite a long time now. But pollinators actually they are herbivores. Like they eat plants. Like pollen is just a little microscopic baby plant is what it is. But it's a plant that actually the plant is producing overproducing this pollen in order to bring in this pollinator so it will transfer some of the pollen, from flower to flower and help grow seed and grow the plants as well. Um, but this is sort of a mutual relationship. So this is an herbivore that's actually pretty good for you. I'm going to treat it as a separate category here because it is very unique. And you've probably heard this statistic at some point, like a third of our food requires pollination by insects. So insects are pollinators are a very important group of insects that we want to talk about and consider when looking at our data and our fields. Another job that insects do that's very important is natural enemies. I've never really liked this word because the word enemy kind of is a bad thing, right? But they're not your enemy. They're the enemies of the pests of the insects you don't want. So they're enemies of your enemies. So they're I guess they're natural friends if you believe that. And it's pretty obvious what role they play, right? They can keep the herbivores in check so the herbivores don't get out of control and become pests, right? And an important thing to think about with insects is, of course, you're talking about transferring nutrients. So you actually, when you grow a plant, that plant converts the sunlight and the air and the minerals in the soil into plant tissue, and it uses those resources. And then an herbivore comes in and reuses those resources, so you get more use out of the same set of resources. And then predators will come in and then transfer that up. They'll use those resources again and again and again. So nature can be really efficient because it uses the same resources over and over and over by eating each other. There's two main types of natural enemies when you're talking about insects or bugs in general. Predators is the obvious one. They're the hunters, the trappers. They're the killers. They go out and they kill bugs and eat them. And not all predators are insects. Here I'm showing some beetles. This is a true bug. This is a bug. And then there's a spider and a centipede. So there's a tons of different kinds of predators. There's all kinds of bugs can be predators. There's another type of a natural enemy that's called parasitoids. Parasitoids are I guess they're technically another kind of predator, but they're sort of a middle ground between a predator and a parasite. They kind of live like a parasite by like attaching to or infesting a host item, but then they go and kill that host item like a predator. So this, for example, this is a dryanid wasp, and what it does is it'll sting a host animal like this. This is a piglet bug, and it stings the host animal and then lays its egg inside that host, and then the egg will grow into these big larvae, and it looks like it's like it's a parasite. It's infesting it. It's feeding off it, but this is actually a predation event that's happening. It's actually eating that piglet bug alive. So it's kind of a gruesome way to be a predator, but it's also very effective. And there's many, many types of insects that are parasitoids. Most of them are wasps, like this dryanid wasp, this wasp, and then this little tiny platygastrid. I'm saying big words that you don't care about. There's also flies. Like this fly will actually lay its eggs. It doesn't have a stinger, so it can't sting inside, but it lays the egg on top of a stink bug, and then the egg will hatch and eat that stink bug. So these are all important animals that you want to have in your ecosystem so that they can actually control the herbivores and they can actually continue this food web to keep nature using resources in efficient ways. And the last group I want to talk about, this is kind of a catch-all category. I'm going to call them recyclers. And these are the insects that sort of, hold on a second, I'm going to try to minimize my, because it's blocking. There we go. All right. Um, Recyclers are kind of a whole bunch of different organisms that will eat dead plant matter, dead insect matter, poop, all sorts of things like that, right? So you've got this circle of life happening throughout your ecosystem with bugs eating plants, bugs eating bugs, birds eating bugs, and all these things. And everyone leaves, bits and pieces behind. They poop out whatever they eat. And these recyclers then take all those resources and convert them back into basal resources that the plants can use and restart the whole food web. Right. So these include things like detritus eaters. This is like these guys right in the middle here. This is a springtail, a millipede, a mite. They will all just feed on whatever's in the soil, little bits of nutrients, little bits of plant matter, etc. You've got dung feeders. Most of the rest of these are dung feeders. This is a dung beetle. This is a lesser dung beetle, is a very, very tiny bug. And this is a dung fly. You also have fungus eaters. The fungus often will eat the poop and the natural resources, and then they'll eat the fungus. So it actually sparks an entire other food web based on these detritivores instead of on the herbivores. All right. So the basic message to get away from here is that insects play a whole bunch of different roles in their ecosystems, and they're very, very integral, very important to the ecosystem. If you look, here's just a very simple idea of a food web where you've got arrows pointing to whoever eats whoever, and you see that most of the links in this food web are insects, they're bugs, right? And that's true of almost any ecosystem out there that lives on land. You're going to find bugs, insects all over them, right? It's going to be insects on most of these links in the food web are insects. So if you have a healthy ecosystem, I can tell you that you're going to have a healthy insect community. Excuse me, water break. Now, the reason that you should care about this as a farmer, as a grower, is because not just because you care about the ecosystem, but no matter what kind of agriculture you're doing, whether you're growing crops in a field, whether you've got an orchard or you're growing a pasture or something like that, the thing to remember is that that's an ecosystem. And that may seem like a really obvious thing, but it's also one of the most like profound and important things to remember is that is whatever that is, crop, field, orchard, pasture, whatever, it's an ecosystem. And it will always be an ecosystem. And a lot of stuff we do in agriculture is basically trying to turn these ecosystems into food factories for ourselves. And you can do that. You can turn an ecosystem into a food factory, but what you can't do is make it stop being an ecosystem. And so all the rules of an ecosystem will continue to apply no matter what you do there. So the only thing you can really do is choose whether it's a healthy ecosystem or an unhealthy ecosystem. And if you make it into an unhealthy ecosystem, if it becomes unhealthy, then over time you're going to see problems with it. It will not be able to maintain its productivity. You'll see the soil slowly erode away. You'll see you lose nutrients, lose links in the food web that'll become simplified and more difficult to manage and control. It will become more expensive for you to maintain it. That's why you see as the food web simplifies, as you lose pests, as you lose productivity, not pests, lose insects and productivity, you have to start doing those services yourself. Like you have to control the pests yourself, you have to pollinate yourself, you have to do all these things. That's why you have to apply fertilizers, insecticides, and stuff, is because nature is not in a position to provide those services for you. And that's going to get worse over time in an unhealthy ecosystem. And those ecosystems will also be more prone to big problems because as soon as a problem comes in, you've got nothing there in the ecosystem to help you pull it back, right? So to recognize it's important to recognize that the health of the ecosystem is a major consideration when you're doing agriculture. But we can say that a healthy ecosystem will have a healthy insect community. And that means that an insect community can be a good indicator for a healthy ecosystem. Like if you have a healthy insect community, that probably means your ecosystem is overall healthy. You've probably got good soil health, you've probably got good plant nutrition, all sorts of things like that. But in order to use insects as indicators to tell us any information about your field, we kind of have to know what does a healthy insect community look like. And this is kind of a can of worms. Like this is a complicated thing. But if I had to narrow it down to just one word, that word would be diversity, right? A healthy ecosystem, a healthy insect community has a lot of things happening in it, has a lot of different types of bugs doing a lot of different things. Right? And so that's the thing that you want to look for in your system. If you want to know if you've got a good, healthy community, a good, healthy ecosystem, see how many bugs you've got, how many different kinds of bugs. And that will be a good indicator to you that you've got a healthy, thriving ecosystem. But there's a lot of different ways that we can measure diversity, right? I'm going to talk about two specific types of diversity that we use as ecologists, as entomologists. The first one is what we call taxonomic diversity or just species diversity. This is just how many species do you have out there. And actually, there's two components to this. The first component is richness. That's just the number of species. So here is in this little box, the richness is four. There's four different species of bugs, right? But that doesn't really tell you a lot about your community because you don't really know how those bugs are distributed. So you also need some information on evenness, how evenly those species are distributed. Let me give you an example here. This is a community that still has the same richness of four, right? And it's got a high evenness. So that means that the bugs are all kind of the same number. So you've got three or four of each individual species. So it's very evenly distributed. Compare that to this community with low evenness. This is an uneven community where you've got a whole lot of one species and then just a few of each of these other species. Now, where you want to be, there's sort of like a spectrum between a community that has just one dominant species and a community that has a large number of even species. There's a whole spectrum in there. And where you want to be is a really hard thing for us to say on a like a grand scheme of things and say you want to be here, right? But in general, in a normal ecological community will look like this. It will be uneven. We have a saying in ecology. It's common to be rare. Most species are pretty uncommon. When we go and sample in a field, we're going to get one specimen of a species or two specimens, and then we'll have just a couple of species that have a large number of individuals. But you don't want to be entirely dominated by one species. You want to have kind of a little bit more of a spread. And so what we're going to look for is sort of we want a high number of species, and we also not want to have a relatively high proportion of those species being fairly abundant, right? So maybe you want for 10% of your species to be really abundant. I'm not sure what number I can give you exactly. We'll work that out in the future as we build up data sets. But those are kind of what you want to say. If you have, one species that's 98% of what you see out there, then you might have a problem. That species might be able to become a pest. So you want to make sure that you have a lot of different species. The thing you're probably most interested in is the jobs that they're doing, like the ecological roles. I'm getting a notification saying my internet connection is unstable, so uh, you might lose me at some point. Yes, Lynette, the year may vary your evenness, that you can have that change over the time, over given time points. Some points at time, even during the time of the day, you'll see different insects active at different times of the day and things like that. But what you really are mostly interested in is functional diversity. This is kind of how many different jobs are being done in your ecosystem, right? And so you want to see all the jobs. Like here, I've talked about these four categories of jobs. You want to see all four categories represented in your ecosystem. You don't want everything to be herbivores because that's really unbalanced, and you're likely to see a pest problem in that situation. But you want a couple of other factors, not just every job being done. You also want to see some redundancy. You don't want to see one type of herbivore. You want to see a variety of different herbivores, right? Multiple species doing basically the same job because they're not going to do the same job. They're going to do it a little differently. And they also respond to the environment a little bit differently. They have different strengths and weaknesses. So if you get like a heat wave in your field, maybe one of your natural enemies isn't resilient to the heat, and so that population crashes. Well, if you have, redundancy, then you've got some second stringers in there who can pick up the slack and still do the service for you. So you want redundancy. You also want balance. So you don't want everything being herbivores. You want to have sort of a good ratio of herbivores to natural enemies. If you have like 50 herbivores in your field and only one or two natural enemies, that natural enemy is going to have a hard time regulating those herbivores, right? Maybe if you get like a 5-to-1 ratio or maybe 6 or 7 to 1, maybe that's a better ratio. That's what you want to look for. And so you want to make sure that all the jobs are being done at the right levels. But you can probably guess based on what I've said so far that it's pretty wishy-washy. We don't exactly know how to measure that. Well, okay, that's actually a lie. We do know how to measure it. We have a lot of measurements, and here's a slide full of all the things that ecologists have used to measure this, right? Every one of these is a different formula, a different index, a different mathematical number that we ecologists have put together to measure some aspect of diversity. And each of these numbers gives us some real nuanced ideas of what's going on. And there's a real complicated mess to this. And um, I would be honest in saying that I think as ecologists and entomologists, we've done a bad job of distilling this down into something that farmers can use. And so that's what we're trying to do at Ecdysis is trying to figure out how to make this work. And so we're going to start, we have a grower portal that will present data to you from your own farms. And what we're going to do is we're going to present a simplified form of this. And it's going to consist of just these four components that we present. Um, Sorry, give me another water break here. All right, so these are the four things that we're going to be presenting to you with our reports. And those of you who have worked with us in the past probably have seen some of these grower reports. Oftentimes the insect data gets left out because it's complicated and it takes a long time to process. But these are the things we're going to be giving you. First, we're going to give you abundance. That just tells you how many bugs we actually collected in our samples. Like here, there's 8 bugs, right? That's abundance. And then richness, as I explained, is the total number of species. There's 4 species, 8 different bugs, four different species here. And then we're going to give you something called a hill number. And this hill number, it's kind of a complex thing, but basically it corresponds to the number of common species in your system. So here they've got, there's 2 common ones, so the hill number here is 2. And then we're going to give you some sort of functional diversity chart. We're using this bar chart right now. We also might consider the pie chart. But this bar chart will give you just a basic overview of which of the jobs are being done and at what levels, okay? So at this point, I'm going to exit out of my presentation. I'm going to take you to our website. So we have our bug box website is what we use to analyze our insect communities. But right now, it's also hosting something, our grower portal or a grower dashboard right here. And I'm going to take you through our grower dashboard to show you what this insect report is going to look like. And if you guys are growers, if you've been part of our projects, the Thousand Farms Project or Project Ignite or Project Avalanche, you'll be able to access this data. So here's what I've seen. What I'm going to show you here is this has invited me. Welcome, Kelton Welch. I am not a grower. I don't have a farm, so I don't have any of my own personal data. So I actually stole Gail Fuller's data. Lynette gave me permission to do this. So we're going to look at Gail Fuller's data and pretend that it's mine, I guess. We'll go click on this link that says Explore My Data. And this will give you data reports that were data that was collected from your farm. Okay, now let me orient just a little bit here. You have different years. We've collected data from Gail Fuller's from Gail's place on 2 different years. We have 2 different projects. Ignite is where we come and sample your field, and Avalanche is where you do your own sampling and report your own results, right? We have 3 different tabs that are available here. I'm going to go kind of quickly through soils and birds because I want to talk about the bugs, but just I want to show you what's on the portal right now so you get an idea. With the soils, you can go through, we have 3 different components here, basic results, Haney, and PLFA. So if we go to the basic results, you can see your basic soil test, your pH, your soil minerals, carbon, things like that, the basics nutrient soil tests. You can also see the results of your Haney test. So you've got all the plant available nutrients, you've got your soil health calculation and your soil respiration, all those sorts of things. This should be available to you, any one of you as a grower, and you can see these results here. You won't be able to see anybody else's results, but you'll see yours. And then PLFAs, this will tell you about your microbial community, your fungal to bacterial ratio, and how many mycorrhizal fungi you have, and things like that. And so you can go through and see that. We also have a birds tab. This is we'll just give you a basic, how many birds did we see, how many different species there were. Here's some information about the actual field that was sampled. And you can go to the birds and you can see they found 5 mourning doves on the Gales farm. So I can actually go and click on this link. This will take you to Cornell's website that's all about birds, and you can read about mourning doves here if you want to do that. So this is a really good informational resource. Um, and these are all data that's collected in your area. Let's get to the insects tab because this is what I'm mostly interested in, and I'm excited to show you. It looks a lot like the birds tab. So what we've got is an overall sort of numbers related to the insects that we've collected in your farm. So we've only sampled one of his sites in 2025, and here's the individual site here. We collected 1,000 bugs on Gail's farm, which is a lot. And Lynette, if you could kindly tell Gail that regenerative farming makes my job a lot harder because I have to identify 1,000 bugs instead of 200. That's like 250 bugs for every sample that we take, right? 150 species that we found there. 9 of those species are considered common species. That seems a little bit low. I want to look into that. We'll review that data and see if it's correct. But then we get to see all those numbers to see your richness, your abundance, and your hill number. And now here is your functional diversity. So you get to see how the community breaks down, right? It's 44% herbivores, 34% natural enemies. So that ratio seems really good, right? It's not far off. We've got a lot of natural enemies. Maybe that can keep their herbivores in check. And maybe there's enough herbivores there to feed all those natural enemies. Not very many pollinators. I wouldn't be too discouraged about that because our sampling methods do sample pollinators at low levels. And so you expect that number to be low. So the fact that you have 9 pollinators actually is a pretty good indicator there, right? And then down here you can see I've got this data organized by family. Insect families, there's so many of them, 88 different families. I'm not going to try to present to you every species, largely because we are using AI to do these preliminary identifications, and I don't have the full confidence in the AI to get them all right. And so I don't want to tell you that you've got a pest. We've identified this insect, and now you're worried that there's a pest or something. But we will show you families. And so I'll look into here. We've got spiders, mites, and scorpions. These are the arachnids. Most of them are spiders. You can see he's got so many different families of spiders here. Lots of crab spiders, orb weaver spiders, jumping spiders, lynx spiders. You see all the diversity of different families of insects that we have. And then at the bottom, we can show you a gallery because we photograph every single specimen to identify them. And so we'll share with you these photos, and these photos will represent the most common families, the ones that are most confidently identified by the AI. And you'll be able to see what is most abundant, what's happening in your system. And these are photos that were taken of bugs on Gail's farm. So he knows what's there now. Eventually, I'm hoping we can expand this and show you all the families, but for right now, I'm being conservative so that we don't show you misidentified information or anything like that. Okay, but this is what your reports will look like, and if you are one of our growers, you should be able to access this data. It will come directly from BugBox. It should be there. Um, Talk to us about getting your account. activated or anything like that. Um, I think you got an email asking you to set a password or something. So if you got that, go look for that and see if you can come and look at your data. What will come in the future, by the way, is we'll give you some sort of way to analyze your data and compare it to like a regional context. You know, you'll be able to say like, what are other farmers in my state doing? You won't be able to see those other farmers' data, but you'll be able to see like an average value a standard that you can compare them to. All right, let's go back to the presentation. I want to geek out for a minute about Gale's bugs. Let's talk, just show in a little bit overview here. You can see that Gale's got all the jobs being done. You've got a diversity of pollinators, like 3 or 4 different species of pollinators that we collected, a whole bunch of different recyclers doing some different jobs. There's a pill bug that eats a lot of rotting vegetation. This guy is a what do they call it? A scavenger beetle, Latridiety. This eats fungus. This springtail will eat plant matter and any soil debris that you want. So you've got a whole a mix of these sort of things going on. Plenty of different herbivores. They'll eat different plants. They'll eat different parts of the plants, etc. And lots of natural enemies. Lots of spiders. You've got some wasps, some flies. But the biggest natural enemy that we found in his field was actually ants. And so here's several species of ants that we found there. These 4 ants were really common. Well, they weren't all common, but they were found in this field. This little black ant, this is an ant that you can find all over the country. It likes disturbed habitats, or actually it likes a lot of habitats, but you can definitely find them in cornfields and sidewalks and things like that. Like most ants, it's got a sting, but it's a very, very small ant and the sting doesn't really hurt you. This one, the high noon ant, is kind of a fun one. There's no surprise that we found this one in Gale Fuller's farm because it loves the heat. It likes dry heat, right? And so most ants, when it gets really hot in the middle of the day, the ants will go hide in their burrows to keep cool. But this ant will be active out in the heat, and so it's called the high noon ant. And it has no sting. That's kind of unusual for an ant to have no sting. Um, so this ant won't
Importante.
hurt
La
you.
primera, mire, lo que le vale a usted un palo doble, gásteselo en un Uber para su casa. Deje el carro allí, búsquelo al otro día. Puede
Hello,
salvar su vida y la de otras personas. Cosas importantes. La primera.
I'm hearing. I'm hearing you, Jose. No worries. All right. They've also got this acrobat ant. This one's a crazy ant because it has sort of the abdomen is hinged upside down, so it can actually like lift its tail up like a scorpion and it puts on this really pretty like intimidating sort of threat display. And this one's sting does kind of hurt, so be careful around that. It also tends aphids, so aphids will eat it on the plant and it will go up and find the aphids and protect the aphids from all the other predators. And then it does this because the aphids drink a lot of juice from the plant, and so there's a lot of excess sugars in that juice. And so the aphids will just poop out their extra sugars and give them to the ants, and the ants like the sugar. So they protect the ants. Yep. And then we have this last ant, this variable field ant. This is also a predator. I think we only found 1 or 2 of them in this field, but this is a very large ant. It does not have a sting. Instead, it has like a nozzle that actually sprays formic acid. Um, it's not as mean as it sounds. Like it doesn't really hurt you that much. It can kind of tingle a little bit, but it's very good for protecting the ant from other sorts of bugs and predators that will attack it. So the ants are kind of a cool thing in Gale's data. And one more thing I want to mention from Gale's data is this bug. And this is something that's really exciting to me. I don't know how exciting it'll be to you guys, but this is essentially an entomological unicorn. This is one of the rarest kinds of bugs that you find. It's very hard to collect these. They're so rare that people didn't even know they existed until like the late 1700s when a scientist went out and found them, you know. We just call them twist wing parasite. This is actually a real parasite. It's not a parasitoid. It doesn't consume the pest that it parasitizes. It just feeds on it over time. But the reason it's so rare is because the male only lives for a few hours, and so you rarely see the male, even though it's this really interesting looking bug with the wings. The front wings are turned into these little knobs, these little hautiers that helps them kind of orient themselves in the air. And they have these big old raspberry eyes. They're crazy. They only live for a few hours. They don't have any way to feed or anything like that. And all they do is they go look for the female, which is attached to the host right here. Now, this is a leafhopper host. And so they'll go find the female, mate, and then they die. And so you have to be right, you have to be out there at exactly the right time to collect them. And we apparently were at Gale's farm and we got one of these at Gale's farm. We found a couple others in Kansas around the same time, but the first one we found was in Gale's farm, which is kind of fun. So I thought I wanted to talk about that. There's cool discoveries being made just in in a rangeland or a crop field or orchards all the time. All right. So let's take a little bit of a step back. We'll go to the last section of this talk here is just how are we getting these numbers? It's essentially it's basically a three-step process, right? And oh, I forgot if you click on the wrong side, it goes backwards. First step is that we collect the insects in the field, and we do this in two different ways. Lynette, excuse me, mentioned that earlier. We use a sweep net, and we sweep that through your vegetation to get all the bugs that are flying, all the bugs that are climbing in your vegetation, things like that. And then we use a soil sampling technique here. We use a visual search in this quadrat to get all the bugs out of your soil, so we know what bugs are out there in both habitats. And then we photograph those bugs in the laboratory. And we used to do it this way, where we'd photograph each individual bug one at a time. And you can see from her face how much Cassie enjoys doing this. But we've recently switched to an automated system here, where we've got basically this machine. It's a computer numerical control CNC machine that will photograph the entire sample at one time, and then we can pull the individual bugs out of that. This speeds it up so one worker can photograph a whole lot more bugs much more rapidly. And then finally, the last step is we upload it to BugBox. That was the platform where we manage our insect experiments. We either upload that one individual photo from here, or we upload a whole sample photo, and then we use a computer algorithm here to extract the individual specimens from the sample. And then BugBox also uses artificial intelligence to identify the bugs, to sort them, and then we can calculate diversity in an automated way. Now, I said it was a simple system, three-step process, but in reality, this is what it looks like from my perspective. Here in the lab, we're trying to manage all the steps, and it's pretty complicated. We've got steps here for photographing the bugs, steps here for getting all the individual bugs out of those whole sample images, and then we've got BugBox for identifying the bugs. I don't care if you know this, I just wanted to show you my cool flowchart. But the two pink boxes here are two different artificial intelligence models that we're using to do this work. This one will find individual bugs in the big sample images, and then this one will identify those bugs to species. One of the questions you might rightly ask me is, why would we use artificial intelligence? Can it really do the job? And I'll be honest with you, there are some complications to it. Like an AI model is not going to match a human, like a team of human experts. If we could put all these human experts on this, give them the actual specimens and look at the bugs, carefully in the lab and everything, we would get much better identifications. In this case, we're taking a photograph. It's a very simplified representation of the bug. The AI model does its best to identify it. We're not going to get the same kind of accuracy here. And so there's some questions about why we would do this. And the reality is volume, and we have to be able to get the data out to so many farmers. But there's hope here, because again, we don't need to identify every single bug perfectly accurately. Like, we don't need perfection. We just need something that you as farmers can use to give you information about your community, about the health of your ecosystem, the health of your insect community. And what we found here is that the AI actually does this really, really well. So these two graphs represent, this is species richness, and this is that hill number. And what we have on the bottom here shows what the AI said the species richness was, and here's what I said the species richness was. And here's these orange, each of these orange dots is one of the samples in my test set here. I think it's 80 samples. And you can see that the number that the AI predicted and the number the human predicted kind of all fall along this line. Like 93% of these dots are really, really close to that line, which means there's a strong, consistent relationship between the number the AI gives us and the number that you would have gotten from me as a human, right? So this means that AI provides a really good estimate of the species richness that's meaningful to you and that's meaningful in a broad range of contexts. So the number that we get when it says species richness, it's an estimate of how many species we found, an estimate of how many species are out there, and the AI's estimate works just as well as my estimate, right? So this is really important to us because we're able to use this AI to get this data out to you in a very timely fashion. And this really is the key here is the productivity because we are trying to work with thousands of farms. We've already sampled, and I don't know if we're quite to 2,000 yet, but we've already done thousands of farms, right? And hundreds of thousands of specimens. And the reality is if we put a team of experts, experts are expensive. It would take us forever to identify them. We could do a really good job, but we can't do that in a way that's meaningful to you. We can't get the data out to you in any time soon. And we'd also be really hamstringing ourselves in our ability to get the data to you quickly. So now what you can do with a web page is you can present the data. Hopefully we'll be able to get to a result where you can take your own photo in a field and then that photo you could upload and get it identified by the algorithm without having to go to an expert or anything like that. And that will give you the best ability that you can to, have your own data sovereignty and be able to judge your own systems easily. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer to it. And so our hope is that we can be the bridge that gets us to that point. Um, there's also some other concerns that people have at artificial intelligence. I'm not actually authorized to like tell you this is our official Ecdysis policy on AI, right? But I'm going to give you my thoughts and my feedback on this. Um, there's a lot of concerns about human jobs, and we do have reduced human labor because of our automation and our artificial intelligence. But we're doing it in a way that we can actually improve our employees' lives, right? We're focusing them on jobs that require their human insights rather than on this rote kind of boring work that doesn't really take a lot of effort from them. There's plenty of review and quality control work we have to do with this AI. And I don't know if you've followed us recently, but we've been more productive the past year or so because we've been able to refocus on doing outreach jobs to be doing putting out scientific publications, social media content, and things like that. And that's largely because we don't need to put all of our time and energy into photographing insects, right? So this is a very valuable resource for us. And there's also concerns about environmental impact. I want to say emphatically, we are not building a data center. We don't have a data center. We're not doing a large language model, a generative AI model that's going to take a whole, it's going to increase your municipal energy budget by 10% and drain your rivers or, things like that. We have a normal office server upstairs and it's cooled by like a little fan, like, just a 4-inch fan or whatever. We're doing our best to be as environmentally responsible as we can. We're also using renewable energy. We have solar power here that's helping power all of this. So it's really important while we're doing this sort of work that we maintain our environmental responsibility while we do this. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to mention, this wasn't the focus of my talk, but inevitably people will have questions about this, is what do you do if you don't have diverse insects and you have a poor insect community, and how can you improve that? And so I'm going to give you just a couple of basic things that we can do. And these are basically principles of regenerative agriculture, some of the principles that we focus on when defining what regenerative agriculture is. You want to eliminate pesticides. Like the pesticide hasn't really been invented that only kills the ones you want it to kill and doesn't kill the insects you don't want it to kill, right? There's no insecticide that can really do that. And so anything you spray out there is going to set your insect community back. You might get you'll get the relief from doing that, right? You might see you protect your yields for one season, but over the long term, you're not going to be able to establish a good, healthy insect community. So you'll always have to keep spraying once you do it once. And the same thing with tillage and disturbances. Like the soil community is where a lot of your recyclers live. And once you've disturbed the soil, those recyclers take a long time to rebuild. And so if you till, that's a big disturbance that's going to really set off the balance of your ecosystem. So minimize your tillants, and ideally you wouldn't have to till at all. And then, of course, you want to diversify. You want to grow as many different plants as you can. Use cover crops, use multi-crops, polycrops, um, uh, use ground covers under your orchard. Maybe, field margins. Even if you take a big field of corn and break it up and grow different crops in that field, that can help. But if you can diversify your crops, um, plant diversity equals insect diversity. And what really helps also is if you can bring insects in somehow, grazing the grass under your orchard or something like that. That can also bring in a whole new collection of insects, and really help the health of your system um, greatly. I think that's all that I wanted to cover today. So just a summary of what we've looked over today. Insects play vital roles. We can measure the community using diversity, and we're trying to put that data in your hands so you can make your own decisions and make the best use of it. I want to thank some people. These are some funders that have been important in developing our software. Um, all the people that have worked at Ecdysis, as well as you guys and the coordinators. Here's some links if you guys want to go to the grower portal, go to the bug box link. Here's just our general website. Thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me.
Wow, Kelton, you covered so many
Oh,
things. Yeah, that is amazing. And all my questions, right? You did a great job. Wow. Because I was going to ask, yeah, what does it mean for AI and all of those? And yeah, and what is our environmental impact? And you covered that too. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of you should be getting an email about that grower portal. We are still working on it and trying to upload all those things. I think just the question about the bugs. We are a little later on getting the bugs back to our farmers from last year. And if you can just kind of talk a little bit about we know the process now as to why, but kind of describe, what's been the slow up and why haven't why wasn't it included in the grower report, things like that.
yeah, yeah. That's been one of the. It's been a source of frustration for me. Is there's a reason that people haven't been giving farmers this kind of data before, right? It's hard to do. People have tried many times. I'm sure you guys have worked with other scientists and you don't get any data at all. Um,
Mhm.
it is very difficult to do insect data at the same pace as the other data. Like the soils data, you can go in and there's a cookbook process. You run through the Haney test and then you're done. And there's contract labs and the process has been really like commercialized and made really efficient. And so you guys are used to getting results from those pretty quickly. Insect data takes time and we've got bottlenecks all over the place in the process. And this last year we were slower than we usually are, and that's because we built up that whole sample imaging pipeline where we're able to photograph entire insects together and entire samples of insects together. In the future, this will make us really fast. We'll be able to handle the same volume of data with a smaller crew, which should be able to speed it up and get the data to you quickly. But this year was we had to build all that and test all those models and we made a bunch of errors and we had to go back and fix it and we had to learn as we were going. And there's only so many people who are doing similar things to us, and so there's only so many sources we can go to learn about how to do this properly. I'm really proud of what we've done. We've got a really cool pipeline put together, and this is going to be pretty transformative, I hope, for farmers being able to see their insect communities in a way that they've never seen them before. But as of right now, we're not at the point where we can just put the data out immediately. There's the promise there. There's a promise that that can be done, and we're almost there. We have the pipeline all together, and in the future, once we get through this backlog, we will be able to do this much more quickly. This is a game changer for entomology, I think. Um, yeah.
And the other thing, right, Kelton, you're part of it, right? Double checking to make sure the AI is correct, right? Double checking that, what the bug box is identifying is correct. And that's kind
Mhm.
of been also part of that slowdown. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, that's not the biggest bottleneck right now. That has been the biggest
Yeah,
bottleneck in the past. Right
it
now,
has.
the
Yep.
AI knows enough species that it can give you
Mhm.
those summary statistics very readily, right? I don't have the confidence that it can identify every individual species appropriately. Now, I've been working on that. I review as many images as I can. I've also got Andres, who does a good job of identifying bugs. We've also got another expert named Ray Fisher, who's one of the best insect identifiers in the world, who started working with us, and is helping
Mhm.
us really get all of our stuff identified correctly. That is a time-consuming process, and it does take expertise, and it does take a lot of oversight. But in the future, that shouldn't be the big bottleneck. The biggest bottleneck is training the AI models and reviewing the work that they do, because oftentimes they make mistakes. If they're looking through a sample and they get a piece of plant debris instead of a bug and they call it a bug, then we have to check that and make sure that it's doing that okay. And that model is trained on a few hundred images so far, and we've got a lot of work to do to make it better and figure out how we have to take the photos and everything like that. But we're there. We have this now, and we should be able to start cranking those data out. If you are in Nebraska this year, your data is up. If you are in Kansas, some of your data is up as well on Bug Box, so it will be on the grower portal. We'll be getting everybody else out there shortly. I think Texas and the California rangelands and Florida citrus will all be up there soon enough. Almonds, you should already have your data and stuff like that. But
And
yeah,
if they were sampled, you know, like in 2024 and 2023, is that information going to be in
oh
bug
yeah.
or in the, yeah.
Yeah, so the cool thing about Bugbox is that it is automated. So we've kept pace right now. So if we sampled your field in 2024, 2023, maybe even 2022, I think, that data is
Mhm.
already on Bugbox, and so it already gets automatically ported over to the grower portal. So you can go and look at that data right now. It should all be there.
Cool. Cool. Any questions that anybody has? Yeah, and another thing that I just wanted to tell everybody, if you have any questions or, you know, need help with the grower portal, or if you happen to have a bug, right, that you get a great picture of, you know, send it to us. You know, I a lot of times will send Kelton, you know, little pictures of different bugs that I find, you know, just to, yeah, see what it is, because I'm curious, right? And so, yeah, that curiosity is really important in farming, just to kind of learn what it is. And we're here to help you. We just want you to know we're here to see the things that you're seeing and and to help you along. So yeah, I want to thank Kelton for being here. It was amazing.
Thanks, Lynette.
I
Thanks for
knew
all
it
you
would
guys
be
do.
because he's such a crazy guy. Yeah, I went on a trip with him last year. I have to tell a story. I went on a trip with him last year and he found a scorpion, right? Yeah. And oh my gosh, and this was in Texas. He found this scorpion in a barn and he took that along for the rest of the trip. And he would be out early in the morning with this little headlamp looking for things to feed his scorpion so he could take it home. So yeah, he really is that crazy bug guy.
Yeah, I did not succeed in keeping that scorpion alive, though. Uh, it's
Well,
in
you
the
know, it
collection
needed
now.
justice. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you all for joining us and thank you, Kelton. And yeah, we'll be continuing to have these amazing conversations. And like we said, if you ever have any questions, just let us know, right? We can help you and we love that conversation. So
Thank you,
goodbye,
Lynette. Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye-bye.